You're watching Noir Lane. I'm your host, David. Remember, every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us what part of the world you're watching from. Subscribe and hit the like button. Join us in the mystery, and let's dive into the story. Chapter 1. No log, no proof. Yet a man ended up dead as if someone had written instructions in advance. That was the shape of it when Inspector Kramer brought it to our front door, and Kramer does not usually bring shapes. He brings noises, sweat, and the suspicion that the city is held together by bad temper and duct tape. It was a raw New York evening, the kind that makes the streetlights look tired. The brownstone on West 35th was warm, civilized, and faintly perfumed by the orchid room above, where Wolf's plants lived like pampered aristocrats, and the rest of us lived like staff. Fritz had produced a dinner that could have convinced a cynic that virtue exists, and Wolf had just finished eating as if time itself had been invented to serve him. Then the bell rang. I opened the door and found Kramer on the stoop. Collar turned up, hat brim wet, his face set in the expression he wears when he has decided to be angry before anyone can disappoint him. "Goodwin," he said. "That depends," I told him. "Are you bringing trouble or returning it?" He pushed past me with a grunt and marched to the office like he owned the house. That always amused me, because the only man who truly owns that house is Nero Wolfe, and Wolfe owns it with the weight of his body and the certainty of his opinions. Wolfe was behind his desk, large and immovable, a yellow rose in his lapel that made him look like a judge dressed by a florist. He raised his eyes to Kramer with mild disapproval, as if Kramer were an uninvited draft. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "you arrive without warning. This indicates urgency or discourtesy, perhaps both." Kramer dropped into the red leather chair opposite the desk, planted his hat on his knee, and glared, "A guy's dead." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is not unusual." "It's unusual enough to pull me out of my chair," Kramer snapped. "And I know you like that. You like the kind that smells like a puzzle, not the kind that smells like the river." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Archie, beer." Fritz appeared at the office door, as if he had been waiting for his cue. A bottle and a glass arrived on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe poured with care, took a sip, and set the glass down as if the matter could now be approached properly. Kramer said, "Name's Victor Lamb, night courier." I lifted an eyebrow. "Courier like envelopes and signatures." "Not that kind," Kramer said. "This one carried keys." That got Wolfe's attention in a quiet way. Wolfe's eyes shifted, focused. His voice stayed calm. "Keys are not common cargo," Wolfe said. "Private security outfits," Kramer said. "Building managers, cash rooms, those little lockboxes in offices where people keep the spare key to their spare key." Lamb had contracts. He picked up keys, dropped keys, signed his name, went home. "Until he didn't," I said. Kramer nodded once. "He didn't?" Wolfe regarded him. "Where was he found?" "In an alley behind a midtown office tower," Kramer said. "He wasn't robbed, wallet intact, watch still on his wrist, phone still in his pocket. The one thing missing is the one thing he always carried." "The keys," I guessed. "His ring," Kramer confirmed. "A big one, tagged, numbered. The kind you don't misplace unless you want to." Wolfe's fingers drummed once on the desk. "Cause of death." Kramer's mouth twisted. "Not pretty." He got hit hard in the back of the head and dropped like a bag of flour. Then someone made sure, not with a gun, not with a knife, with pressure, took away breath. No blood, no mess, clean, quiet, like somebody didn't want a sound. Wolfe's gaze turned colder. "Professional. Or careful," Kramer said. "That's not the part that made me think of you. The part is the call." Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. "What call?" Kramer leaned forward, hat still on his knee. "The tower has private security on site. Not cops, not the building superintendent, a security desk in the lobby. They keep logs, every visitor, every delivery, every call. Or they're supposed to." Wolfe's voice was mild. Supposed to is one of the most dishonest phrases in the language. Yeah, Kramer said. Well, Lamb shows up at the tower at 10:42. He's on camera. He goes in, talks to the security desk, gets waved through. Then he never comes out. At 11:15, someone calls the security desk. The guard answers. The call is long enough to matter. Wolf's eyes narrowed. And it is not recorded. That's it, Kramer said. The security desk has a switchboard book. Old school, you write the calls down, time caller. Subject if you can. There's no entry. The guard says he got a call. Sure, but he can't remember the details. He says it was busy. He says he forgot. He says a lot. Wolf's lip curled faintly. An unrecorded call to a security desk is a confession without words, Kramer grunted. We checked the phone system. The call came in on a line that should have been captured by the building's internal logger. It wasn't, no digital record either, like it never happened. I leaned back at my desk. So either the guard is lying, or the system is being handled. Exactly, Kramer said. And the guard's logbook has a gap. One page looks like it was replaced. Same cover, same binding, wrong paper. Somebody slid a fresh sheet in there and thought no one would notice. Wolf's eyes stayed steady. Summonen did notice. You bet, Kramer said. Me and a tech who hates humanity. The replacement sheet has the same handwriting for the rest of the shift, but it's too clean. No coffee stains, no smudges, nothing. A logbook page without stains is like a bartender without fingerprints. Wolf nodded slowly, and Victor Lamb carried keys instead of packages. Keys and silence, Kramer said, and somebody benefited. Wolf leaned back in his chair. Inspector, why do you bring this to me? Kramer glared. Because it smells like someone planned it. Like the caller gave instructions, like the lack of record is the point, and because the building is filled with rich people who hire private security and lawyers and think they can erase paper the way they erase waiters. Wolf's gaze did not soften. You want my assistance. I want a name, Kramer said. I want someone I can lean on. I want the guy who thinks he can murder a courier and scrub a phone call out of the universe. Wolf picked up his beer, took a slow sip, and set it down. Very well, Kramer blinked, just like that. Wolf's voice was flat. Do not mistake my agreement for enthusiasm. I am curious. A missing record is, indeed, louder than a confession, because it announces that someone was afraid of being heard. Kramer stood, relief and irritation fighting on his face. I'll send what I've got. Wolf nodded. Do so. Archie will require access to the security desk, the guard, the logbook, and the camera timestamps. Kramer hesitated, then said, The building management isn't cooperating. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Then they will. Kramer's mouth twisted. You've got a way with people. I have a way with facts, Wolf said. People are incidental. When Kramer left, I closed the door behind him and returned to the office. Wolf was already staring at nothing, which is what he does when he is building a structure in his head. Wolf, I said, this is going to be one of those cases where everyone claims they never saw anything and the paperwork is too clean. Wolf's eyes remained steady. Yes, which means, I continued, you're going to make me walk into a lobby full of men with earpieces and smiles and ask them why their book page is wearing a disguise. Wolf's mouth tightened. You have a talent for understatement, Archie. Thanks, I said. I practice. Wolf leaned forward slightly. The victim is a courier of keys. Keys represent access. Access represents power. Therefore, the motive is power. I nodded. Or money. Wolf's expression was faintly contemptuous. Money is merely a crude form of power. He glanced toward the window, where the city's lights looked smeared by rain. An unrecorded call suggests that instructions were delivered without leaving a trace. The question is not whether the call occurred. The question is who required its silence. I said, and who benefits? Wolf's gaze sharpened. Precisely. Fritz appeared with a tray, quietly placing a plate near Wolf's elbow. It was a small, late offering, something refined and warm, as if Fritz believed even murder should not interfere with proper habits. Wolf accepted it with a nod, because Wolf can be gracious when food is involved. "Archie," Wolf said between bites, "you will go to the building tonight." "Tonight," I repeated. "Yes," Wolf said. "The guard will still be on shift, or his replacement will be nervous. The lobby will still smell of the event, and nervous men make mistakes while the fear is fresh." I stood, grabbed my coat, and headed for the hall. A man who carried keys instead of packages. "Sure," I said. "But what kind of fear makes a man carry keys at night?" Wolf finally raised his eyes to mine. "The kind that knows what happens when the wrong door opens." That was Wolf being poetic, which always means he's serious. We went out into the wet New York night and caught a cab. The driver complained about traffic. I let him. Complaints are a civic service here. The office tower was a tall, glassy thing with a lobby designed to make people feel small and controlled. The security desk sat like a command post near the turnstiles. 2 guards were on duty. One looked bored. The other looked like he had recently discovered that boredom can be replaced by panic without warning. I walked in with my best harmless smile and headed straight to the desk. "Evening," I said. "I'm looking for the supervisor on duty." The board guard said, "Who are you?" "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said. "I work for Nero Wolf." The board guard's expression changed. The nervous guard's expression changed more. Names do that. They open doors. They also make men with secrets sweat. The nervous guard swallowed. "We already talked to the police." "I'm not the police," I said. "That's why you should be comfortable." He did not look comfortable. The board guard leaned back slightly. "We can't discuss internal procedures." I nodded. "Sure you can. You just don't want to. That's different." The nervous guard glanced toward a door behind the desk, probably the little office where the logbook lived. I watched his eyes. "Let's make it easy," I said. "I'm here about an unrecorded call." The board guard's face stayed blank. The nervous guard flinched. That was enough to tell me which one of them knew exactly what page was missing. I smiled wider, because I'm rude that way. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not asking you to confess. I'm asking you to tell me who benefited from your silence." The nervous guard opened his mouth to answer, then stopped, because the elevator doors behind me chimed softly. Someone stepped into the lobby, and the air shifted. Shoes too expensive for the rain. A coat too good for an ordinary night. A man who walked like he expected the building to belong to him. He looked at the security desk, then at me, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes narrowed with recognition that shouldn't have existed. He smiled politely. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. I did not like that. Not one bit. Because it meant I had walked into the lobby looking for a missing record, and the missing record had already learned my name. Chapter 2, the man in the expensive coat smiled as if we were old friends who had once shared a cab in the rain. "Mr. Goodwin," he said again, soft, pleasant, and certain. I did not return the smile. New York is full of men who know your name without earning it. They are never good for your health. "And you are," I said. He gave a small nod. "Caleb Rintz. I manage the property for Hartwell Holdings. This building is one of ours." That explained why he walked like he owned the marble. It did not explain why he had recognized me, unless he had been warned I was coming, which made my neck prickle. The board guard straightened and said, "Mr. Rintz." The nervous guard swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the office door behind the desk again, like a man thinking about running without moving. Rintz looked at the guards with mild disapproval, then back to me. "Inspector Kramer has already been here." "Yes," I said. "He brings badges." "I bring trouble that does not wear a badge." Rintz's smile held. "Mr. Wolf's reputation is, of course, considerable." "Is it?" I asked. "Considerable enough to make your security desk forget how to keep a log?" The board guard's jaw tightened. The nervous guard flinched. Rintz's eyes remained calm. "We keep logs, Mr. Goodwin. Then you will not mind showing me the one that matters, I said. Rince made a small gesture, as if offering me courtesy. You are welcome to submit a request through our legal department. Sure, I said, and you are welcome to wait while I grow old. His smile thinned slightly. The police are handling an active investigation. Yes, I said. And they will handle it until it becomes paperwork, and then you will handle it until it becomes nothing. That is why I am here now. Rince's gaze sharpened a fraction. I am sorry you feel that way. I leaned a little closer to the desk, just enough to make the guards uncomfortable. Let's simplify. There was a courier named Victor Lamb. He came in here last night. He carried keys. He never came back out. Your logbook has a gap. Your phone record has a gap. Your lobby camera has a gap. I am not asking for your cooperation. I am asking how much you want to look complicit when this is finished. The bored guard opened his mouth, but Rince spoke first. Mr. Goodwin, he said, voice still pleasant, I will ask you to leave. I nodded. You can ask. I am not required to answer. Rince's eyes held mine. The smile did not reach them anymore. You are not permitted behind the desk. I don't want behind the desk, I said. I want the truth, and it's usually closer than the desk is. The nervous guard made a small sound in his throat. I turned slightly toward him. You were on duty last night. He swallowed. Yes. What's your name? I asked. Elliot Prine, he said. Elliot, I said, warm and friendly, which always confuses nervous men. Did anybody call this desk last night? His eyes darted to Rince. Then back to me. Number the word came out too fast. That was not a denial. That was a reflex. I nodded slowly. No one called, all right. Then why did you tell Kramer the caller sounded like a woman? He went pale. The bored guard's head snapped toward him. Rince's eyes narrowed. Prine's mouth opened and closed. I didn't say that. You did, I said, or you would not be changing color. Rince's voice was smooth. Mr. Prine, step into the office. Prine looked as if his legs might not work. He glanced at me, desperation flickering. Then he glanced at the office door. I said, before you go, Elliot, one more. If nobody called, then you have no problem telling me what the caller's voice sounded like. His lips trembled, he whispered. Low, calm, like they knew I'd do what they said. That was enough. Rince's face stayed composed, but his eyes hardened. Office, now, Prine obeyed, stepping through the door like a man entering a confession booth. Rince turned back to me. You have done enough here. I've done enough, I agreed. You've done too much. His smile returned polite and cold. Leave, Mr. Goodwin. I left, because I had extracted what I needed, and because staying would have produced nothing but a charge and a headache. I walked out into the rain and stood under the awning long enough to see the building's revolving door swallow a few late tenants, each one carrying their own secrets like umbrellas. Then I went across the street, found a phone booth that smelled of regret, and called Wolf. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had been waiting for information. Well, Wolf said. They don't have any calls, I told him. Not officially. The guard swears nobody called, then describes the caller's voice. Anyway, Wolf's tone did not change. Good. Contradiction is a gift. There's more, I said. Building manager Caleb Rince. He recognized me on sight. That means someone told him I was coming. Wolf was silent a beat. That indicates urgency. Also, I said, the lobby camera glitched for 6 minutes. Prine mentioned it without being asked. 6 minutes right when the courier came in, right when the guard stepped away. Wolf's voice was dry. A convenient sickness. Very, I said. If you can get Kramer to pry the footage, the glitch will be the cleanest stain. Wolf said, return home immediately. I hung up, caught a cab, and rode back downtown with my mind already arranging the pieces into a picture that I did not like. A courier carrying keys, a missing ring, an unlogged call, a camera that went blind for exactly the needed window, and a building manager who knew my name. Then there was the body, dumped in an alley. Yes, but staged to look like an accident in the building's own arteries. It had the feel of a plan, not a scramble. At the brownstone, Wolf was in his office with a folder open, a beer at his elbow, and an expression that meant he had been reading consequences. I sat at my desk and started laying out what I had. Wolf listened without interruption, then nodded once, slowly. "The camera blind spot," Wolf said, "is more important than the call." "Because it shows action," I said. "Because it shows cooperation," Wolf corrected. "A call can be denied. A camera glitch requires participation or access." I frowned. "Access like the building manager." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Or the tenant who benefits." I leaned forward. "Tenant." Wolf tapped the folder. "Inspector Kramer provided me with preliminary information. A safe was opened in the building during the relevant window." I blinked. A safe in an office. The door was found ajar by morning staff. No forced entry. No obvious theft. No missing electronics. No missing art. Only papers. "Papers," I repeated. Wolf nodded. "Documents, files. Items that can ruin someone if removed or revealed. That explains the courier's keys," I said. "He carried access." "Precisely," Wolf said. "He was not a courier in the usual sense. He was a moving lock." I rubbed my jaw. So someone needed the keys he carried to open that safe, or needed his ring, or needed him out of the way. Wolf's gaze was steady. "All three," I said. "If the call wasn't logged, it was meant to be deniable. Instructions delivered with no record, so later they can say it never happened." Wolf's mouth tightened. "Deniable acts are attractive to cowards. They believe deniability is safety." "And Wolf likes deniable things," I said, "because they always leave fingerprints." Wolf's eyes held mine. "Yes." He leaned back, hands on the arms of his chair, and said, "We will locate the tenant whose safe was opened. We will identify what papers were taken, and we will discover who benefits from those papers being absent." "And the unrecorded call," I said. Wolf nodded. "We will treat it as a lever. Someone called to move the guard, to create the blind window, to allow the courier to enter, and to ensure the keys changed hands," I said. "Kramer didn't tell me the tenant." Wolf's voice stayed calm. "He will. He is irritated, but he is not stupid." He lifted the phone and dialed Kramer with the assurance of a man ordering a meal. While it rang, Wolf looked at me. "Archie," he said, "you will return to that building tomorrow morning." I groaned. I thought I'd made enough friends for one night. "You will return," Wolf said, "because the guard has already contradicted himself. Contradicting men contradict again, and Caleb Rintz has made himself a factor. Factors must be handled." The phone was answered. Kramer's voice came through, rough. "What?" Wolf said. "Inspector, I require the identity of the tenant whose safe was opened, the location of the safe, and a list of what is believed missing." Kramer grumbled, then said, "You move fast." Wolf replied, "I move correctly." There was a pause. Then Kramer named the tenant. Wolf listened, his expression tightening slightly at the name, as if it carried a specific weight. When he hung up, he looked at me. "Archie," he said, "our tenant is a man who profits from silence." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Wolf said the name. It was not Caleb Rintz. It was worse, because it was a man whose papers could ruin a lot of people, and whose ruin would make a lot of people rich. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Now you see why the log is missing. The call was meant to be deniable, but it is not invisible." He picked up his beer, took a slow sip, and set it down with care. "Missing records," Wolf said, "are louder than confessions. They announce fear. Fear announces guilt, and guilt, Archie, is always profitable to someone." I looked at the rain-streaked window, thinking of the 6 minutes of darkness in the lobby camera and the calm voice that knew a guard would obey. Then my phone rang. When I answered, a man's voice said, low and calm, "Stop looking at the logbook," I said. "Who is this?" The voice replied, "Someone who knows what happens when the wrong door opens." Then the line went dead. Chapter 3/10. The next morning Wolf had restored his faith in civilization, with 3 things: hot coffee, a competent breakfast, and 2 full hours with the orchids. I mention that because it was the only part of the day that felt sane. Everything else involved men who insisted records did not exist while sweating over the ink. Inspector Kramer had sent over what he could without admitting he was helping. With Kramer, cooperation is always disguised as irritation. A messenger dropped a thin folder at the brownstone, and Wolf opened it with the caution of a man handling a dirty rag. "Archie," he said, reading. "The victim's employer is a small courier outfit that specializes in key transport." "Night couriers with key rings," I said. "Sounds like a business designed by a locksmith with ambition." Wolf did not look up. "The route sheet for the night in question is attached. You will go there." "You," I said, hopeful, "will remain here, naturally." Wolf's eyes rose. "Naturally." He turned a page, his expression tightening slightly. "What?" I asked. "The final stop on the route was added in pencil," Wolf said. "That's not illegal," I offered. "It is not honest," Wolf replied. "Ink is approval. Pencil is apology." I leaned over his desk and saw it. The route was typed and clean, with addresses and times in ink. Then at the bottom, squeezed between 2 lines like an afterthought that had grown teeth, was a scribble in pencil. "A last-minute stop. Added after the route was approved," I said. "Yes," Wolf said, and added by someone who expected it to be deniable. Fritz appeared in the doorway with a small tray because Fritz believes that work should not prevent the body from being treated decently. Wolf accepted the plate without looking away from the route sheet. "Archie," Wolf said, "take this, speak to the route manager, determine who authorized the pencil addition." "And if he lies," I said. Wolf's mouth tightened. "He will. That is why you will listen to what he says after he denies it." I took the folder and left, stopping only to enlist Saul Panzer with a call from the hall. Saul's voice was calm, as always, the voice of a man who makes a living by being overlooked. "You want me," Saul said. "I want you," I said, "to be invisible near a route manager." "I can do invisible," Saul said. "Where?" I gave him the address. Kramer had included. Saul did not ask questions. He rarely does. Questions are something other people ask, while Saul collects answers. The courier outfit operated out of a narrow ground floor space on the west side, the kind of place that smells like old cardboard and tired coffee. A sign above the door tried to look official. Inside, the office furniture had been purchased with the same optimism that produces cheap ties. A man behind a counter looked up and gave me the tired glance of someone who expects complaints. "I'm here about Victor Lamb," I said. His face tightened. Polis already came. "I'm not police," I said. "That's why you should be comfortable." That line did not work on him. He looked less comfortable. "I want the route manager," I said. He hesitated, then jerked his head toward a door marked Operations. Gabe Ruggiero turned out to be a man with a soft belly and hard eyes. The kind of guy who tries to compensate for a desk job by keeping his voice sharp. He sat behind a battered desk with a route board on the wall and a phone that had seen better decades. "What?" he demanded, before I had even finished stepping into the room. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I work for Nero Wolf." That name changed the temperature. Gabe did not melt, but he stopped pretending he was in charge of the conversation. "What does Wolf want?" he asked. "Not what," I said. "Who?" His eyes narrowed. "I already talked to the police." "Yes," I said. "And you gave them the version with fewer details." He stiffened. "I told them everything." "Then you won't mind telling me again," I said, sitting down without being invited because my knees were tired and my patience was worse. I slid the route sheet onto his desk and tapped the penciled edition. "Who added this?" I asked. Gabe's eyes flicked to it. "That. Yes," I said. "That." He shrugged. "Victor did." "Victor wrote it in pencil," I said, "after approval, on a sheet you control." Gabe's jaw tightened. "Drivers can request additions we accommodate." Then it would be in ink, I said, or initialed, or entered into the system, not scribbled like a grocery reminder. Gabe's eyes hardened. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you a man who knows the difference between a proper update and a secret stop, I said. Victor Lamb didn't approve routes. You did. Gabe leaned back, arms crossing. I don't know what you're fishing for. I smiled. I'm not fishing, I'm counting. He blinked. 2, I said. 1, the unrecorded call to the security desk. 2, a 6-minute camera glitch. 3, this penciled stop. That makes 3 coordinated things. That's not an accident. That's planning. Planning requires an author. Gabe's mouth tightened. It was a request. From who? I asked. He hesitated. His eyes dropped to the desk, then slid back up. From the client. Which client? I said. He lifted a hand. Confidential. I leaned forward. Gabe, a guy is dead. Confidential is a word you use when you want to keep your job, not when you want to keep your dignity. His face flushed. You don't know what you're talking about. Try me, I said. He stared at me a moment too long. Then he said, it was a call. My eyebrows rose. Now we are getting somewhere. Gabe swallowed. A woman called. She said she was from building management. She had a calm voice. She knew Victor's name. She said he needed to make an extra stop. A woman, I said. Calm voice. Knew the name. What did she sound like? Gabe's jaw tightened, like she expected me to do what she said. I held his gaze. Did you? He looked away. We accommodate clients. I tapped the pencil mark. So you wrote it in pencil so you could later say you didn't approve it. Gabe's face tightened. I didn't think anyone would die. People rarely do, I said. Yet they keep doing it. I stood. Gabe, you're going to leave this office for lunch. He stared. What? You're hungry, I said. You look like a man who lives on coffee and regret. Go eat. He blinked, suspicious. Why, because I like healthy suspects, I said. They talk longer. He scowled. I'm not a suspect. You're a factor, I corrected. And you're going to walk out this door and go somewhere predictable. Gabe's eyes narrowed. I'm staying here, I shrugged. Then you'll stay here. I left his office and stepped out onto the sidewalk, where Saul Panzer was already positioned across the street in the way. Only Saul can manage. He looked like a man waiting for a bus and thinking about the weather. I crossed over without breaking stride. Saul nodded. If he does not leave. He will, I said. If someone is paying him to keep secrets, he will meet someone again. Saul's mouth twitched slightly. That was his version of agreement. I headed back to the brownstone because Wolf had another thread waiting, and Wolf hates waiting unless it involves food. When I arrived, Wolf was in his office, a beer at his elbow, the folder open, and his expression mildly offended by the world. What did you obtain? Wolf asked. Pencil stop added after approval, I said. Gabe claims the client requested it. He says, a calm-voiced woman called, knew Victor's name, and expected obedience. Wolf's eyes narrowed. The same pattern. Also, I said. Gabe is now being watched. Wolf nodded once. Good, now we require the victim's phone. I can call Kramer, I said. Wolf lifted a hand. Already done. He will permit you to access the device. It is in evidence. That is Wolf. He treats an annoyed inspector like a cabinet that will open if you pull the right handle. I went to the precinct, signed enough paper to kill a tree, and was handed Victor Lamb's phone in an evidence bag, along with a look from the desk sergeant that suggested I should be ashamed of knowing Wolf back at the brownstone. I set the phone on my desk and stared at it. Wolf watched from his chair. Proceed. I don't love touching evidence, I said. My fingerprints are already all over New York, but I prefer not to donate them to murder. Wolf's voice was dry. Use gloves. Fritz had provided a box of clean gloves, because Fritz provides everything eventually. I pulled a pair on, opened the evidence bag, and powered the phone. It turned on and displayed a lock screen with Victor's name. "Outgoing calls," I said, navigating, "are wiped." Wolf's eyes narrowed. Of course. Text messages were mostly empty. Recent numbers were blank. Someone had done a tidy job, which means someone had done it in a hurry and thought tidy was the same as complete. Then I checked voicemail. One message. I played it. At first there was only static, the faint hiss of a bad connection. Then I heard a breath, close to the microphone, like someone leaning in. Then a single word, low and calm. "Listen." That was all. I played it again. Same hiss, same breath. Same word. Wolf did not move, but his eyes sharpened. Again. I played it again, Wolf said. "Stop." I stopped. "That is not Victor Lam's voice," Wolf said. "I didn't think it was," I replied. "Too calm, too deliberate." "It is an instruction," Wolf said. "A command." I frowned. "A voicemail command. To whom?" Wolf's gaze stayed steady. "To a man who would obey. Consider the security guard." I stared. "You think Victor left a voicemail to the guard?" Wolf's mouth tightened. "Number, I think the caller used Victor's phone or a related line to deliver an instruction that would be preserved. Listen. Listen, and do what follows." "Followed by what?" I asked. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "The unrecorded call, the camera glitch, the stepping away, the exchange of keys." I sat back, feeling the pieces settle into a darker shape. So the call wasn't a warning. "No," Wolf said. "It was a command, and someone obeyed." The phone on my desk suddenly looked less like a device and more like a witness who had been gagged. Someone had wiped the outgoing calls, but they had missed the voicemail, or they had left it because they believed a single word meant nothing. Wolf looked at me. "Archie, a man who plans carefully will erase what implicates him, but he will sometimes leave what he believes is harmless. That is vanity." I nodded. "Or confidence." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Confidence is simply vanity with better tailoring." My phone rang then. Saul Panzer. I picked it up. "Saul." "I have Gabe," Saul said. He left. He walked 3 blocks and met a man behind a diner. "Behind a diner?" I repeated. "Yes," Saul said. "Not a friend, an exchange." "What kind?" I asked. "Envelope," Saul said. "Gabe gave it." "Who was the other man?" I asked. Saul's voice stayed calm. "A city dispatcher. I saw the badge clip and the radio. His name on the tag was Orendask." I looked at Wolf. Wolf's eyes had narrowed again, which meant his mind was already walking the line from dispatcher to records. "Anything else?" I asked Saul. Saul paused. Gabe looked frightened. The dispatcher did not. I said, "Stay on them." "I will," Saul said, and hung up. I relayed it to Wolf. Route manager passed an envelope to a city dispatcher behind a diner. Name Orendask. Wolf's expression turned slightly grim. "A dispatcher can control time." I frowned. "Time?" Wolf nodded. "Calls routed, responses delayed, patrols redirected. A dispatcher can create a 6-minute absence as easily as a man can create a 6-minute camera glitch. The same hand may be touching multiple systems." I exhaled slowly. "So we have the command word, the pencil stop, and now a payoff to someone who can make things happen without leaving a clean record." Wolf's gaze stayed steady on the phone. "Listen, listen," I echoed. Wolf leaned back, heavy and certain. "The word is appropriate. Everyone involved was instructed to listen and obey. The only question is whose voice they were listening to." I looked down at Victor Lam's phone, at that single preserved word sitting in the dark like a seed. Then I said what I had been thinking since last night in the lobby. Wolf, the guy in the building, Caleb Rintz, recognized me before I spoke. Someone warned him I was coming. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Yes." "So the command voice." I said, "It's not just controlling guards and dispatchers, it's controlling information flow." Wolf nodded once. "Yes, And that is why we will not chase the voice, we will chase the benefit. I stared. Benefit like those missing papers from the tenant's safe. Wolf's tone was mild. Precisely. He picked up his beer, took a slow sip, and set it down. Archie, Wolf said, you will go to see the tenant. And ask him what papers got stolen, I said. Wolf's eyes held mine. You will ask him what papers could ruin him. Then you will observe which answer frightens him most. I stood, grabbed my coat, and headed for the door. Behind me, Wolf's voice followed, calm, as always. And Archie. Yes. Listen, Wolf said. I paused, then smiled without humor. You're enjoying that word. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Number, I am respecting it. I went out into the city again, into the winter air and the traffic noise, thinking about a courier who carried keys and died with no log, no proof, and one preserved whisper. Listen. It sounded simple. It never is. Chapter 4, The Tenant's Name. When Wolf spoke it yesterday, had landed in the room like a dropped paperweight. Silas K. Breen. If you read the papers, you knew him as a civic saint with a private smile and a public foundation. If you did business downtown, you knew him as a man whose endorsement could make a deal smell respectable. If you had ever needed a contract to survive daylight, you knew him as the kind of respectable that comes from expensive ink. His suite was on the 26th floor of the same tower where Victor Lamb had walked in carrying keys and walked out carrying nothing at all. I arrived mid-morning with a briefcase that contained nothing but a pad, a pencil, and the ability to look polite while being nosy. The lobby guards recognized me now, which was not reassuring. They did not stop me. That was worse. When people stop fighting you, it can mean they have decided you are not dangerous, or they have decided the danger is already done. The elevator brought me up to the 26. The reception area outside Breen's office was carpeted thick enough to muffle remorse. A woman behind a desk glanced up, performed a smile, and asked for my name as if names were taxes. Archie Goodwin, I said. Her smile froze. It recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. One moment, Mr. Goodwin. She vanished through a door. That made sense. Breen was the type who did not allow surprises. He licensed them. A young man in shirt sleeves appeared instead of Breen. He was lean, pale, and wearing the strained expression of someone who has spent the last 12 hours answering questions while pretending to be calm. His tie was loose. His eyes were too alert. Mr. Goodwin, he said. I'm Martin Epps, controller. Controller, I said. That means you control things that want to get loose. He tried to smile. It failed. Mr. Breen is in a meeting. At this hour, I said. Interesting. Epps hesitated. He asked me to speak with you. That's generous, I said. I was hoping to speak with him. Epps's eyes flicked. The police are already investigating. Yes, I said, and they will investigate until they hit a wall made of counsel. I like walls, they tell you where the room really is. He swallowed. What do you want? The truth, I said. But I'll settle for facts that keep the truth from fainting. Epps's face tightened. About what? About your safe, I said. His eyes flicked toward a corridor behind him. That corridor probably led to the offices where quiet documents lived and loud secrets hid. Epps said, nothing was taken. That's the line you give donors, I said. Try the version you give your mirror. His jaw tightened. Some papers. What kind? I asked. Old notes, he said quickly, as if hoping speed would make the answer seem small. Meeting notes, internal. Meeting notes, I repeated. The sort that never matter unless they do. Epps's mouth tightened. It's being handled. I nodded. By whom? By counsel, he said. Counsel handles consequences, I told him. I'm interested in causes. Epps stared at me, and the stare had panic under it. He was not a hardened liar. He was an accountant who had wandered into a story where numbers were less dangerous than paper. All right, I said, softening my tone because you catch nervous fish with quiet water. Martin, I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here because a courier is dead. That makes the paperwork less important than the bloodline. His eyes widened. Bloodline. It's a figure of speech, I said. Come on, show me the safe. He hesitated, then nodded once, tight and resigned, and led me down the corridor. The suite was a maze of offices that smelled like leather chairs and held back opinions. We stopped at a door with a keypad. Epps punched in a code, and the door opened to a small interior room. It was colder inside. A safe sat against the wall, heavy, black, and built to resist everything, except someone who already had the right keys. The safe door was closed. Now it had been closed carefully. The handle gleamed. Epps gestured at it as if it offended him. It was found open, no damage. No damage, I said, except to whoever needed what was inside. Epps swallowed. We inventoried the contents immediately. What was missing? I asked. His eyes flicked again helplessly toward the corridor. Notes. You already said that, I replied. Which notes? He exhaled sharply, like a man giving up a small piece of himself. 3 legal pads. Yellow, spiral top. Mr. Breen's handwriting. What were they about? I asked. Epps hesitated. I leaned slightly closer. Martin, you don't get to be nervous without reason. The reason is those notes. His mouth tightened. They were about a contract. I waited, he added. A city contract. From years ago, waste hauling. That woke up a bell in my head. Waste hauling contracts have a long history of attracting men who like cash because cash does not leave receipts. Epps continued quickly, voice low. Mr. Breen advised a consortium. There were meetings. There were irregularities, payments. Payoffs, I said. He flinched. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, I told him. A crooked contract and a payoff chain, those are the notes. Epps's face went pale. We are not involved in anything illegal now. Now is a lovely word, I said. It means you're worried about then. He swallowed. The notes were old. Old notes are only valuable when they can ruin someone today, I said. Epps's hands clenched. Why would anyone want them? Because, I said. They can be used to blackmail Mr. Breen. They can be used to protect someone else. They can be used to bury a chain of payments that leads somewhere inconvenient. He stared at the safe. Mr. Breen is going to be furious. I nodded. Yes, and frightened. Epps's eyes snapped to me. He is not frightened. Then he won't mind speaking with me. Epps's mouth tightened again, but he did not answer. Which was an answer. We returned to the reception area, and Epps tried to shepherd me out as if sunlight might dissolve me. Before he could, I said, Martin, one more thing. He stiffened. What? That courier, I said. Victor Lamb, was he supposed to stop here? Epps hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw the truth trying to climb out. No, he said finally. He wasn't. That's important, I said. Why wasn't he? Epps's voice dropped. Because the route was approved. This stop wasn't on it. Then, around midnight, Summerknown called again, not to announce his arrival, but to make our staff's later movements seem authorized, if anyone asked. Yet he arrived anyway, I said. Epps swallowed. Summerknown forced it. They wanted a paper trail of urgency after the fact, something that would explain why doors opened and people moved. I watched his eyes. Who? He shook his head, miserable. I don't know. I came in this morning and saw the building reports, and Mr. Breen's assistant said the security desk had called. Late at night, around midnight, said a courier was coming with keys for an emergency access, said we had to be ready. I felt my pulse rise. A security desk called you. Epps nodded quickly. Or someone claiming to be. We didn't log it. It was late. It sounded official. Did the voice sound like a woman? I asked. Epps flinched. Yes. Low and calm, I said. He nodded again, eyes wide. Yes, like they knew you'd do what they said, I added. Epps stared at me. How did you know that? Because the same voice has been making men obey all over this building, I said. I left him there, pale and rattled, and rode the elevator down with my mind racing. Midnight, an emergency call. A forced stop. A safe opened, notes removed, a courier dead. It was clean enough to make you believe it could only be coincidence if you had never met coincidence in a back alley. Outside, Saul Panzer was waiting in a way that looked accidental. He stepped close as I came out under the awning. Dispatcher met the route manager again, Saul murmured. Different place. Same envelope habit. I got a license plate this time. I nodded. Good. Saul's eyes were calm. You look pleased. I'm not pleased, I said. I'm less blind. Back at the brownstone, Wolf was in his office with beer and a stack of papers and the expression of a man who has already decided the world is lying and is now selecting which lie is useful. I reported. The missing notes, the crooked contract, the payoff chain, the midnight call to Breen's office, the forced stop. Wolf listened with the stillness that means his mind is turning like a safe dial. When I finished, he said, "Good. That's it." I asked, "Good." "Yes," Wolf said. "We have motive." "Motive to steal old notes," I said. "But why kill the courier?" Wolf's eyes narrowed. Because Victor Lamb was not supposed to understand what he was carrying. He carried keys as a habit. This time he carried leverage. I frowned. He might have listened. Wolf's gaze was steady. "Precisely. You found a voicemail with a single word." "Listen," I said. Wolf nodded once. "A command. The caller required obedience. The security guard obeyed. The route manager obeyed. The tenant's staff obeyed. Somewhere along the chain, Victor Lamb either did not obey, or obeyed too well and learned too much. Either error is fatal to planners." I leaned forward. "So the plan is," altered route, unlogged call, camera gap, safe opened, papers removed, courier eliminated, and then everyone claims it was bad luck. Wolf's mouth tightened faintly. Bad luck is what liars call planning when the plan works. I sat back, letting that settle. So who benefits from Breen's notes disappearing? Wolf's eyes held mine. Summoning connected to the old contract. Someone who cannot permit those notes to be found by police, press, or prosecutors. Someone who can command men in different systems to produce gaps, a person with reach. "Caleb Rintz," I said. "Property manager." Wolf shook his head slowly. "Rintz is a functionary, useful, but not central. He recognized you because someone told him to expect you. That tells us there is a communications hub, a person who can see the board and move pieces." I frowned. "The dispatcher," Wolf nodded. "A dispatcher is positioned to create absence and delay. A dispatcher can also place calls that sound official. You have a name." "Oren Dask," I said. Wolf's gaze sharpened. "And now we will acquire his connections." I stood. "How?" Wolf's eyes narrowed. "By making him speak." He accepted envelopes. "That indicates greed. Greed requires protection. Remove the protection and greed will become talkative." That was Wolf's polite way of saying he intended to crush a man until the truth fell out. The phone on my desk rang, I answered, expecting Saul or Kramer. Instead, a low, calm voice said, "You are walking in circles." I gripped the receiver. "Who is this?" the voice replied. "You found the papers. You will not find the hand." I kept my tone light. "I found a hand. It left fingerprints on a logbook." A small pause. Then, very softly, the voice said, "Listen." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver as if it had insulted me. Wolf, watching, said, "You see?" "Yeah," I said. The voice likes that word. Wolf's eyes narrowed. The voice is becoming impatient. That is useful. "How?" I asked. Wolf's gaze stayed steady. "Because impatient people make mistakes, and mistakes archie our records even when no one logs them." He lifted his beer, took a slow sip, and set it down. "Tomorrow," Wolf said, "we will invite the relevant parties to this house." I blinked. "Invite like a party." Wolf's mouth tightened. "Like an examination." I stared at him. Who are the relevant parties? Wolf's eyes held mine. The property manager, the route manager, the security guard, the dispatcher if possible, and Mr. Breen, who will dislike attending, and therefore will attend. I whistled softly. That's a crowded office. Wolf's tone was calm. Truth requires witnesses. I leaned back, feeling the case tighten. We had no log, no proof. Yet a man was dead as if someone had given instructions in advance. Now, we had papers missing, a payoff chain, and a calm voice that kept calling to remind us it existed. And Wolf, when he decides to gather people in his office, is usually preparing to do something final. That is when the smart ones start sweating. Chapter 5. Wolf dislikes waiting, but he enjoys the kind of waiting that makes other people uncomfortable. That afternoon he had the office arranged as if it were an operating room. The chairs were placed with intent. The beer was cold. The desk blotter looked innocent. Fritz had been instructed to keep the doorbell answered promptly, and the faces admitted slowly. "You are staging," I told Wolf, watching him sit behind his desk with the calm of a man who believes walls were invented to protect him from nonsense. "I am arranging conditions," Wolf replied. "Staging is theatrical. Conditions are logical." "Sure," I said, "and I'm the chorus." Wolf's eyes narrowed faintly. "You are the legs." Saul Panzer and Fred Durkin were in the house, present but not obvious. Kramer, irritated and curious, had agreed to attend under the pretense that he was just listening. When Kramer says he's just listening, it means he expects to be annoyed and hopes to be impressed. The first arrival was Caleb Rintz, the building manager. He came in a tailored coat and a controlled smile, and behaved as if he were doing us a favor by stepping into Wolf's office. He sat carefully, as if the chair might bite him. Next came Elliot Prine, the lobby guard. He looked smaller in daylight, smaller in Wolf's office, smaller under Wolf's eyes. He carried his cap in his hands and kept rubbing the brim as if trying to erase his own fingerprints. Gabe Ruggiero, the route manager, showed up last, escorted by Durkin in the polite way that suggests refusal was never an option. Gabe's hard eyes were less hard now. They were tired. He sat down and avoided looking at anyone, which is what men do when they suspect the room is full of people who can see through them. Wolf regarded them all, waited until the silence had grown heavy enough to press against their ribs, and then began. "Gentlemen," Wolf said, "a man is dead, Victor Lamb, a courier of keys. The circumstances indicate planning. The planning required cooperation. Cooperation leaves traces. You will now provide them." Kramer grunted from the yellow chair by my desk. "That's nice, Wolf. Try a question." Wolf ignored him and looked at Elliot Prine. "Mr. Prine," Wolf said, "you have lied." Prine's face flushed. "I didn't. You did," Wolf said calmly. "You denied receiving a call and then described the caller's voice. That is a lie. Correct it." Prine's hands tightened on his cap. His eyes flicked toward Rintz, then away, then toward the floor. That pattern told me he feared Rintz more than he feared Wolf, which in my book is a dangerous miscalculation. Prine swallowed. "I answered a call." Wolf nodded once. "Yes," Prine added quickly, "but it wasn't from outside. The line showed internal. No number." Rintz stiffened slightly, but his face stayed composed. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Internal meaning from within the building system. Prine nodded fast. "Yes." It lit up like an internal extension. Kramer leaned forward. "What extension?" Prine shook his head. "It doesn't show. It just shows internal." Wolf's voice stayed mild. "Convenient." Prine's cheeks colored. "That's what it showed." "I can't help it." Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Tell us what the caller said." Prine hesitated. His lips trembled slightly. "He said," Prine whispered, "that a courier was coming through with a key delivery for Suite 26. He said it was urgent. He said I would step away from the desk when he arrived." Wolf's eyes narrowed further. "You complied." Prine's voice rose slightly in panic. It sounded official. Kramer's voice was rough. "Official how?" Prine swallowed. "Like it outranked me." Wolf leaned forward a fraction. Authority is a sound as much as a title. Prine's eyes flicked to Wolf. He knew my nickname. That landed. Wolf's face did not change, but I saw his eyes sharpen. What nickname? Wolf asked. Prine's voice was small. Priney. Gabe Ruggiero made a short sound, half laugh, half disbelief. Priney. Prine flashed him a look of anger. Don't. Wolf's tone stayed calm. Only staff, or close watchers, would know that. Prine nodded quickly, relief at being understood, mixing with fear at being exposed. Exactly. The guys on shift call me that. Sometimes the supervisors, not tenants, not strangers. Rince's jaw tightened. Wolf shifted his gaze to Rince. Mr. Rince, do you call him Priney? Rince's smile was polite. I rarely address guards by nickname. Wolf's eyes held his. Do you address them at all? Rince said. Through supervisors. Wolf nodded, as if placing Rince into a category labeled plausible but unproven. He turned back to Prine. When you answered, did you say anything? Prine swallowed. I said hello. Wolf's voice was soft. And the caller? Prine's voice dropped. He said, Priney, listen. There was that word again. I glanced at Wolf. Wolf's mouth tightened faintly. Listen, Wolf repeated. Prine nodded. Yes. Then he told me what to do. Kramer's jaw clenched. And you did it. Prine's shoulders sagged. Yes. Wolf leaned back. Now we require corroboration, Archie. That was my cue. I stood and went to the hall. Saul Panzer was there, looking like he had simply wandered inside to escape the cold. He nodded once. I opened the front door. A man stepped in wearing a janitor's uniform. He was middle-aged, thin, with eyes that had learned to watch without being watched. His hands were rough. His expression was wary. He looked at Wolf's office doorway, as if it might lead to trouble. This is Mr. Lopez, I said, closing the door behind him. He works nights in the building. Lopez's gaze flicked toward Prine and Rince, then away. Wolf's voice carried from the office. Bring him in, Archie. I guided Lopez into the office. He paused in the doorway when he saw Kramer. I didn't do nothing, Lopez said quickly. Kramer growled. Nobody said you did. Sit down. Lopez sat on the edge of a chair like a man prepared to stand again fast. Wolf regarded him. Mr. Lopez, you witnessed something at the lobby security desk the night Victor Lamb died. Lopez licked his lips. I mop floors. Wolf's tone stayed calm. You also have eyes. Lopez hesitated. Then he nodded once, reluctantly. I saw. Wolf said, tell us. Lopez glanced at Prine, then at Rince, then back to Wolf. I was near the desk. I was emptying the trash. The guard got a call. He put his hand to his headset, listened. Prine's face flushed deeper. Lopez continued, voice low. Then he took off the headset, like he didn't want it recorded, like he didn't want nobody to hear it. Lopez nodded. Yes, he said. Yes, sir. The words hit the room. Prine's head jerked up. I didn't. Lopez's eyes narrowed. You did, I heard. Prine's face went pale. He looked at Wolf with helpless anger. He's making it worse. Wolf's voice was calm. Number, he is making it accurate. Wolf turned to Prine. You said yes, sir. Prine's mouth worked. Then his shoulders sagged, and something in him broke just a little. Yes, he whispered. I did. Gabe Ruggiero muttered, like the call outranked his job. Wolf's eyes shifted to Gabe. Your turn, Mr. Ruggiero. Gabe stiffened. I told Archie, a woman called Calm Voice, said it was building management. Wolf nodded. A woman. Prine shook his head quickly. Number mine was a man. That was important. Wolf's gaze sharpened. We have two calls, different voices, same word, same pattern. The word is a cue, and authority is the costume. He looked at Lopez. You said he took off the headset. Why? Lopez shrugged, uneasy. Maybe. He didn't want the desk mic to catch him. The lobby got that little recorder. The supervisor says it's for training. Rince stiffened. We do not record audio. Lopez glanced at him. Yes, you do. Sometimes, when you want. Rince's smile thinned. Wolf leaned back slightly. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. You may go. Archie will see you are not inconvenienced. I escorted Lopez out, handed him an envelope from Wolf's petty cash because Wolf believes witnesses should be compensated for truth, and returned to the office. Wolf looked at the men. Authority, Wolf said, is often a costume. It can be worn by anyone with a calm voice and the correct knowledge. A nickname, a schedule, a safe combination, a route sheet. If you believe the costume, you obey the wearer. Kramer grunted. You gonna tell me who wore it? Wolf's eyes narrowed. Not yet. Rince's voice was controlled. Mr. Wolf, this is absurd. You are implying my staff is part of a conspiracy. Wolf regarded him. I am implying your staff is obedient. There is a difference. Rince's jaw tightened. We follow procedures. Wolf's tone stayed mild. You follow instructions. He turned his gaze to Prine again. Mr. Prine, the caller knew your nickname. That narrows the field. Name the people who use it. Prine swallowed. The night shift. Some supervisors. Wolf nodded. Names. Prine hesitated, then began listing, haltingly, 2 guards, 1 supervisor, a trainer, a dispatch liaison who sometimes visited to coordinate building security with city services for events. When Prine said that last one, Wolf's eyes narrowed. A liaison, Wolf said. From where? Prine swallowed. From Central Dispatch. His name is Oren Dask. There it was again, the dispatcher's name turning up in a place it had no business being, unless it belonged there. Kramer's face darkened. Dask. Wolf nodded once. Yes, authority traveling on borrowed credentials. I leaned forward. Prine, did the caller sound like Dask? Prine hesitated, confused. I don't know. I never talked to Dask on the phone. Wolf said, but you have met him. Prine nodded. He came by sometimes. He joked. He called me Priney. Wolf's eyes held his. Then the knowledge of your nickname may come from him. Prine's face went pale. I didn't think. Wolf's voice was flat. That is why costumes work. Kramer stood up, anger tightening his shoulders. If Dask is involved, I can get him. Wolf lifted a hand. Do not rush. If Dask is the costume, there is a wearer beneath it. A dispatcher is useful, but dispatchers are not kings. Someone is directing. Someone benefited from those missing notes. Gabe Ruggiero blurted. I didn't know nobody would die. Wolf's gaze slid to him. No one ever does. That is why they commit crimes. Rince's smile had vanished now. Mr. Wolf, you are building a story. Wolf regarded him with contempt mild enough to sting. Number, I am building a chain. The chain begins with a word. Listen. The chain ends with a dead courier and missing papers. In between are men who obeyed a voice. He leaned forward slightly. I want to see who is wearing authority. The room was quiet. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it. Unknown number. I looked at Wolf. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he had heard the vibration in his bones. I answered. A low, calm voice said, Stop putting people in that room. I smiled without humor. Which room? Wolf's office. It's a popular room. The voice did not laugh. You will not like what happens if you keep listening, I said. That's funny. All you ever tell people is to listen. A pause. Then, softly, tonight. Don't go out tonight. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver. Across the room, Wolf watched me. Eyes steady, mouth tight. Archie, he said. Yes, the costume is speaking, Wolf said. That means we have tugged the correct thread. Kramer growled. What did it say? I told him. Kramer's face hardened. Threats. Wolf's voice stayed calm. Not threats, instructions. The same habit, the same arrogance. The caller believes obedience is inevitable. I looked at Wolf. And you want to see who's wearing it. Wolf nodded once. Yes. He lifted his beer, sipped, and set it down. Tonight, Wolf said, we will do exactly what the caller instructed us not to do. I sighed. Of course we will. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Because when a man believes he can command, he reveals himself when command fails.
I glanced at Prine, who looked like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. I glanced at Rince, who looked like he wanted to call counsel. I glanced at Gabe, who looked like he wanted to go back to ink and pencils and pretend people did not die. It was about a voice that could make men say yes, sir, without knowing why. And Wolf had just decided to make that voice hear the word no. Chapter 6. If there is one thing Wolf trusts less than human honesty, it is institutional alibis. A man can forget, a guard can lie, and a manager can hide behind policy. A phone line, on the other hand, is supposed to be dull. Dull is dependable, so when a phone call disappears, Wolf takes it personally, as if the city's plumbing has developed opinions. He sent me after the plumbing. Archie, Wolf said at breakfast, we require the telephone company's maintenance records for the building system. If the call was internal, it traveled on a line. Lines leave traces. I looked at my plate. Fritz had done something with eggs and herbs that made me briefly consider forgiving the city. You want records from a phone company. I want facts, Wolf corrected. The company is incidental. Kramer had grunted and promised cooperation, which meant he would cooperate as long as he could complain while doing it. By noon, I had a contact in the telephone company's maintenance department who owed Kramer a favor and did not enjoy remembering it. The favor produced a printout and the kind of sigh that makes you believe resentment is a public utility. I brought it back to the brownstone and laid it on Wolf's desk. Wolf adjusted his glasses and read. Eyes moving with quick precision, he read the date, the time window, the building's internal trunk lines, the recorded outages, the repair tickets, and the technician notes. Then he looked up. No official outage, Wolf said. No repair ticket, I added. No service call, no system glitch, no reason for a missing entry. Wolf nodded once, slowly. Therefore, the absence is not a malfunction. It is a decision. That was Wolf. He treats technology the way he treats people. If it misbehaves, he assumes motive. The day's second gift arrived via Saul Panzer. Saul called mid-afternoon, voice calm. I spoke to Orrin Dask, Saul said. Let me guess, I said. He denies breathing. He denies involvement, Saul replied, but he used a phrase. What phrase? I asked. Saul paused. On the call, the phrase was, Blue Lantern. I felt my eyebrows rise. Blue Lantern. Saul's voice stayed level, an old radio code. He used it casually, like a habit. I frowned. No civilian should know that. Correct, Saul said. He did not like being asked why he knew it. I looked across the room at Wolf. Wolf was listening, eyes narrowed, as if the phrase had been spoken in his ear. I said into the phone, Did Dask admit he used it? No, Saul said. He said he heard it once, years ago. He said he forgot what it meant. He then explained what it meant. I snorted. Nice trick. Saul continued. He also reacted when I mentioned the courier. He asked which keys were missing. Keys, I said. He said, the ring or the second key. Saul's voice stayed calm. Exactly, stay with him, I told Saul. Don't spook him. Let him feel safe. Saul said, he does not feel safe. Then, let him feel less unsafe, I said, and hung up. I turned to Wolf. Blue Lantern, old radio code. Dask knows it and pretends he doesn't. And he mentioned a second key. Wolf's eyes narrowed, interesting. Also, I said, Saul says Dask asked which keys were missing. Wolf nodded. He is listening too closely. That line would come back. The third gift of the day came from Gabe Ruggiero, the route manager by way of his own mouth. Durkin had brought him back to the brownstone at Wolf's request. Gabe arrived looking defensive and tired, as if he had slept in short bursts and spent the rest of the night regretting the existence of envelopes. He sat in the red leather chair, hands on his knees, trying to look like a man who had made a small clerical mistake, not a man whose pencil mark had helped get someone killed. Wolf regarded him with mild contempt. "Mr. Ruggiero, you have maintained that you are innocent." Gabe's jaw tightened. "I didn't kill nobody." Wolf nodded. "That is not the question. You facilitated. You obeyed a call. You altered a route sheet. You accepted money." Gabe's eyes flashed. "I didn't accept money." Wolf's gaze remained steady. "Your protest is unconvincing, Archie." I opened my drawer and produced a photograph Saul had taken behind the diner. It was not art, but it did its job. It showed Gabe, his hand extended, an envelope in motion. Gabe stared at it and went pale. "That's not what it looks like." Wolf's voice was flat. "It looks like an envelope." Gabe swallowed. "It was to cover overtime. They said it was a rush job. They said Victor would get paid extra." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Who said?" Gabe hesitated. "A guy from Dispatch. Orrin, I didn't know his last name." Wolf nodded once. "Of course." Gabe's shoulders sagged. "Look, the stop came in last minute. I didn't think it mattered. Victor did weird stops all the time." Wolf's voice stayed calm. He did not make this one in ink. Gabe's face tightened. "I scribbled it, so what?" Wolf leaned forward slightly. "So you expected deniability?" Gabe's mouth opened, then shut. He looked at his hands. Wolf said, "Describe Victor Lamb's keys." Gabe blinked. "His keys?" "Yes," Wolf said. "You have described him as a courier of keys. How were they carried?" Gabe shrugged. "Big ring tags, numbers." Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Only that." Gabe's lips moved. He hesitated, then said, "And the second key." I felt my stomach tighten. Wolf did not move. His eyes narrowed a fraction, and his voice stayed mild. "The second key," Wolf said. Gabe froze. His face drained. "I didn't mean." Wolf's tone remained calm. "You did mean. You simply forgot what was public." Gabe's mouth worked. I heard people talk. Wolf's eyes were cold. "You are not a man who hears without listening. Explain the second key." Gabe swallowed hard. "Victor had a special key, not on the ring. He kept it separate, for emergency lockboxes. For high-security clients, he called it his second key." I leaned forward. "How would you know that?" Gabe's eyes darted. "He mentioned it once." Wolf's gaze held him. "When?" Gabe's voice was small. "Weeks ago he was complaining. Said the second key made him nervous. Said if it ever went missing, he was dead." The room went quiet. Wolf's mouth tightened faintly, and then he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a man wears when a puzzle finally stops pretending. "Good," Wolf said softly. Gabe stared. "Good, a guy's dead." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Good for the case, not for civilization," I said. Wolf, Dask used the phrase Blue Lantern, and mentioned the second key, too. Wolf nodded once. "Then Mr. Ruggiero's slip is not incidental. Someone has been listening closely, too closely." Gabe's voice cracked. "I didn't tell nobody." Wolf's gaze stayed steady. "You did not need to. The second key is known by the person directing this. That indicates proximity, a person who has watched Victor Lamb, a person who has spoken with him or overheard him or acquired his information through a system." Kramer, who had been standing near the door like a large irritation, said, "Dask could have picked it up from the root shop." Wolf shook his head. "Perhaps, but Dask also appears at the building. He jokes with guards, he learns nicknames, he uses codes, he has access to internal lines. He is a conduit." Kramer's jaw clenched. "Then I pick him up." Wolf's eyes narrowed. Not yet, Kramer growled. Wolf, a man's dead? Wolf's voice stayed calm. Yes, that is why you must not squander the living. Kramer looked as if he wanted to argue, then shut his mouth. Even he knew Wolf was building toward a controlled strike. Wolf turned to me. Archie, the phone company records prove there was no outage. Therefore, the missing entry was deliberate. I nodded. Someone erased it. Wolf's eyes sharpened, or bypassed it. A costume of authority can include access. A man who can use an internal line without leaving the usual record is not merely pretending, he has keys of his own. I thought of Victor Lamb's ring. I thought of the safe. I thought of the 6 minutes of blind camera. I thought of the word listen sitting in a voicemail like a seed. I said, so the voice had two voices, a man to the guard, a woman to the route manager and the tenant office. Wolf nodded. Authority wears any costume required. And Blue Lantern, I said. Old code. Wolf's mouth tightened. Old codes are used by men who believe they have inherited the right to command. He leaned back and closed his eyes briefly, not from fatigue, but from concentration. Archie, Wolf said, opening his eyes again, we will now force the wearer to show himself. I raised an eyebrow. How? Wolf's tone was calm, by baiting him with what he fears most, the missing notes. I frowned. They already have them. Wolf nodded once. Yes, which means they fear exposure. We will imply exposure. We will invite panic, Kramer muttered. You love panic. Wolf regarded him. I love truth. Panic is merely one method by which truth becomes sloppy. He looked at me. You will inform Mr. Breen discreetly that the police may obtain copies of his missing meeting notes from another source. I blinked. Another source. We don't have another source. Wolf's eyes narrowed. We will not need one. We need only the suggestion that we do. I smiled slowly. Murder by suggestion, now solved by suggestion. Wolf's gaze stayed steady. The difference, Archie, is intent. I stood, already reaching for my coat.
All right, I'll go plant your little idea. Wolf's mouth tightened. Do not plant it, place it. Planting implies concealment. We want it to be seen. As I headed for the hall, Wolf's voice followed me, soft and precise. And Archie? Listen, Wolf said. I paused, then nodded. This time I will, and I hope the costume does too. Chapter 7, if you want to see who is desperate. You do not stand outside a bank and watch people go in. You put a bill on the sidewalk and watch who bends down too fast. Wolf's bill was a file. He did not like leaving the house, and he did not like improvising. So he did what he always does. He made me improvise under his direction and then took credit for the logic. That is partnership. The plan was simple enough to be dangerous. We would create the suggestion of a replacement copy of Silas Breen's missing meeting notes, and then we would wait for someone who could not tolerate that suggestion to act. The difference between a rumor and bait is that bait has a hook. At noon, I took a taxi to a small copy shop on 9th Avenue that still had the smell of toner and resignation. I had a folder in my briefcase and a story in my face. I had been told by Wolf to be convincing and careless, which is a tricky combination because carelessness must be performed precisely. The folder contained nothing real. It held typed pages I had assembled from details. Martin Epps had let slip, along with a few invented names to make it look like a chain. The top page carried a title in bold letters that would stop a man's breath if he recognized it. Wast Hauling Consortium, closed session notes. Under that, a date. Under that, a list of initials and amounts, and the kind of shorthand men use when they believe ink is safe. It was fiction. But it was the right kind of fiction. It looked like the kind of thing a nervous accountant would photocopy in a hurry and regret for years. From the copy shop I went to Breen's Tower and rode up to the 26th floor again. I signed in at the reception desk, smiled at the same woman whose smile still did not like my name, and announced that I had been asked to drop off material for Martin Epps. "Mr. Epps is expecting it," I said, with the confidence of a man lying without blinking. She hesitated, then buzzed Epps's extension. A moment later she nodded and said, "Leave it with me." That was what I wanted. I handed her the folder and watched her place it on a tray beside her desk, as if it were ordinary paper and not a manufactured disaster. Then I left. I did not go far. I went across the hall to a small alcove near a decorative plant that looked unhappy and took a position where I could see the reception desk without being seen too obviously. Saul Panzer had a better position farther down, as if he were waiting for an elevator. Saul can look like a man waiting for an elevator in a way that makes you want to apologize for existing. We waited. It took 20 minutes. At the 21st minute, the elevator opened, and a man stepped out who had not been there when I visited earlier. He was in his 30s, slim, well-groomed, wearing a good suit that looked like it had never been forced to sweat. He walked quickly, the way executive aides walk when they believe time belongs to the people they serve. He went straight to the reception desk, leaned slightly, and spoke with a casual familiarity. The receptionist smiled. That meant he belonged. It also meant she would not question him too hard. He glanced down at the tray. His hand moved. Quick hands, too quick. The folder vanished under his arm with the smoothness of habit. Then he turned to go back to the elevator. Saul moved, not abruptly, not like a cop, but like a man who has decided to walk in the same direction for no reason at all. I moved too, drifting out of the alcove as if headed elsewhere. The aide reached the elevator bank and pressed the button. His eyes flicked once down the corridor. He saw Saul. He saw me. He slowed slightly, then resumed his calm. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped in. So did I. He turned his head, and his polite mask tightened. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," I said. "Because you just stole my folder." His eyes narrowed, then his smile returned. "Stole." Number I was sent to retrieve it. "By whom?" I asked. He hesitated just a shade too long. "By Mr. Breen." "That's nice," I said, "because Martin Epps told me he was expecting it." The aide's jaw tightened. "Epps is not authorized to receive certain materials." The elevator started down. The aide kept his posture controlled, but his fingers tightened on the folder. I nodded. "So you are authorized." He lifted his chin. "Yes." "What's your name?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Harris, Miles Harris." "Mr. Harris," I said, "you have quick hands and slower lies." His eyes flashed. "Excuse me." "Look," I said, dropping the friendly tone because friendly tones only work on men who still believe they can be friendly. "That folder is bait. You took it because someone told you to. Now tell me why." His face tightened. "I have nothing to say to you." The elevator doors opened in the lobby. He started to step out. I stepped with him, staying close. Then say nothing in a room with more privacy. He stopped and looked at me, irritation and calculation mixing. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. The name landed. He blinked, then his eyes narrowed. "Wolf," he said. "Wolf," I confirmed. "He loves deniable things. You should keep that in mind." Harris's mouth tightened. "This is harassment." "Not yet," I said. "It can become harassment if you insist." I guided him toward a small seating area near the building's side entrance, out of the main foot traffic. Saul drifted near enough to be noticed only if you were looking for him, which is the best kind of pressure. Harris sat reluctantly, still holding the folder like it contained explosives. "Open it," I said. He stared. "Number, if you think it is real," I said. "You already know what it means. If you think it is fake, you have no reason to protect it. Either way, open it." His eyes narrowed. Then, with a controlled sigh, he opened it and flipped the pages quickly. I watched his face. For a second, there it was. Recognition, not full comprehension, not certainty, but the kind of startled focus that comes when a man sees something he has been told to fear. Then he closed it and said, "This is nonsense." I nodded. That's what liars say when they believe they can still control the room. You work for Breen. You would not snatch nonsense off a tray. His jaw tightened. You do not understand the stakes. Try me, I said. He looked at Saul, then back to me, and finally exhaled. All right, he said. The missing papers. Yes, I said. He swallowed. They were not only embarrassing, they were lethal. Lethal is a big word for yellow pads, I said. Not lethal like blood, he snapped. Lethal like power. I nodded. Who? He hesitated, then said, a contractor. What contractor? I asked. His mouth tightened. Greystone Municipal. Wolf's file on the city contract had mentioned a consortium. Greystone was the kind of company name you give a firm that wants to sound permanent. It also sounded like the kind of company that has done favors for the right people. Harris continued, voice low. They have city work, waste hauling, maintenance, security systems. They partner with security vendors and handle union labor. Union labor, I repeated. He nodded. A union boss, yes. Name, I said. He hesitated, then said it quietly, like a curse. Rocco Velin. That name meant nothing to me personally, but I recognized the type, the kind of man whose name makes conversations quieter. Harris looked sick now, as if he had broken a rule by speaking it. The notes, he said, Could topple him and Greystone, and a lot of people who have been smiling in city meetings for years. I leaned forward. So someone killed Victor Lamb to protect that chain. Harris's eyes widened slightly. I did not say that. You didn't have to, I said. It's written in the missing log. Harris swallowed. Mr. Breen did not order anything. No, I agreed. He benefits from silence, but he is not the only one. Harris's face tightened. The unrecorded call protected more than one person. I smiled without humor. Now you are learning Wolf's language. Harris stared at the folder. If those papers surfaced, there would be investigations, subpoenas, scandals. It would ruin the foundation. It would ruin city contracts. It would ruin lives. And that, I said, is why someone came hunting for a replacement file. He looked up sharply. We did not come hunting. We were warned. By whom? I asked. He hesitated. A call internal. My eyebrows rose. Internal. No number. His mouth tightened. Yes. I nodded, and the voice. He hesitated, then said, Male, calm, like it owned the building. I looked at Saul. Saul's eyes were calm, but I could see his attention sharpen. This matched Prine's description. Harris swallowed. It said Blue Lantern, retrieve the file. There it was, an old radio code on a call to a corporate office. Wolf had been right. Someone was wearing authority like a suit and using it to move pieces across different systems. Security desks, route sheets, dispatch radios, and now executive aides. I said softly, Mr. Harris, you just made your life more complicated. He flinched. I did not have a choice. Everyone has a choice, I said. Most people just dislike the price. When I returned to the brownstone with the folder and the new names, Wolf listened without moving. His eyes narrowed at Greystone Municipal, narrowed further at Rocco Velin, and then narrowed again at the phrase Blue Lantern being used in that context. Good, Wolf said. That's the second time today you've called something good that feels like sewage, I replied. Wolf's tone was mild.
Sewage is valuable when it reveals the plumbing. I told him about Harris, about the quick hands, about the warning call, and about the contractor network. Wolf leaned back and steepled his fingers. The unrecorded call, Wolf said, protected more than one person. I nodded, and more than one person can be squeezed. Yes, Wolf said, which means we choose the neck. I raised an eyebrow. Nice image. Wolf's gaze stayed steady. Accurate, a shared secret is a shared noose. The difficulty is selecting which party fears strangulation most. Breen fears scandal, I said. Greystone fears prosecution. Velen fears losing his grip. Dask fears being caught playing dispatcher for hire. Rince fears losing his job. Prine fears losing his freedom. Wolf nodded slowly, and the voice. The voice fears exposure, I said, because it lives on being obeyed. Wolf's mouth tightened faintly. Yes, therefore, we will make obedience costly. He reached for his phone. Archie, summon Inspector Kramer. Inform him that we have identified a contractor and a union connection. I grimaced. That will make him cheerful. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Inspector Kramer is never cheerful. He is merely less unpleasant when he smells progress. I stood and went to place the call, feeling the case tighten like a rope drawn through rings. We had started with no log and no proof, only a dead courier and an unrecorded call. Now we had names that could shatter a city contract, a phrase used like a badge, and a man behind the curtain who kept telling people to listen. Wolf had no intention of listening any longer. He intended to speak and to make the right ears hear him. And in Wolf's house, when he decides to pick which neck tightens first, someone usually ends up begging for mercy in very clear English. Chapter 8, the first thing I noticed was that the brownstone's bell rang twice. Not two separate visitors. One visitor, two rings, close together, the second one harder than the first. That is what frightened people do when they are trying to be polite and failing. I opened the door and found Mr. Lopez on the stoop. Yesterday he had been a thin man in a janitor's uniform with cautious eyes. Today he was the same thin man. But his uniform was replaced by a cheap coat, and his cautious eyes had turned into the eyes of someone who has just learned that caution is not armor. His cheek was swollen. One eye had the purple bloom of a fresh bruise. His lower lip was split and badly wiped, as if he had tried to erase the blood with his sleeve and then regretted it. His hands shook slightly, the way hands shake when the body wants to run and cannot find a direction. He saw me and swallowed. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, voice rough. "I need talk." "You need ice," I said. "Come in." He stepped inside as if the hallway might bite him, then stopped and looked around with a quick, frightened scan. He was checking corners, shadows, the stairs, the kind of reflex you get after someone has grabbed you and proved that walls are not protection. "Fritz," I called. Fritz appeared at once. He took one look at Lopez and his face tightened in quiet disapproval. "The disapproval of a man who believes injury is crude," Fritz said. "Sit, I will bring what is needed." Lopez sat on the edge of the chair in the front room. He kept glancing at the door as if expecting it to open again, with a worse visitor. I said, "Who did that?" Lopez's mouth tightened. "Two men in the stairwell at the building." "The tower," I said. He nodded quickly. "They waited. They knew my shift. They grabbed me when I go empty trash. They say, 'You keep mouth shut.'" His hands clenched together. I say nothing. They hit anyway. I leaned on the mantel and kept my voice calm. Calm is contagious if you apply it early. "They hit you to remind you." Lopez swallowed. "Yes." Fritz came back with a cloth, a small bowl, and a bottle that smelled like medicine and discipline. He tended Lopez with gentle efficiency. Lopez flinched at first, then let himself be helped, which told me the fear had not erased his sense. I said, "Lopez, you came here anyway." "Why?" Lopez's eyes were wide, shining. "Because the call." "The call," I repeated. He nodded hard. "The call was from inside." I felt my shoulders tighten. "Inside the building." "Yes," he said, voice urgent. "After hours. Not outside line. Not city, not any number inside." I stared. "How do you know?" Lopez swallowed, grimacing as Fritz touched his swollen cheek. "I clean the utility closet. I hear things. I see the service phone, nobody use it. Then, that night, after the courier come, I see the door open. I see light. I hear voice. I said, "You heard the call being made." Lopez nodded. I hear someone speak calm voice like boss, like they own the place. I felt my stomach tighten, man or woman. Lopez hesitated, then said, "Man, low voice." Wolf's voice came from the office doorway. "Archie." I turned. Wolf stood there, large and still, looking at Lopez with the mild displeasure he reserves for the world's roughness. "Bring him?" Wolf said. Lopez stiffened when he saw Wolf, as if expecting another authority figure. I guided him into the office, and Wolf studied him the way he studies an object that has been mishandled. "Mr. Lopez," Wolf said, "you are injured?" Lopez nodded quickly, "Yes, sir." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Do not say sir unless you mean it." Lopez blinked, confused, then nodded again. Wolf said, "Tell me what you know, concisely." Lopez swallowed. "There is a phone in utility closet, service phone, not the desk phone, not the office phones hidden." Wolf's eyes sharpened. "Where's this closet?" "Near the freight elevator," Lopez said. "On the service floor, the locked hallway, only staff." Wolf nodded once. "Continue." Lopez's voice shook. "That night, I see door open. I hear voice, I hear the word." Wolf's gaze held him. "Which word?" Lopez swallowed. "Listen." There it was again, like a coin that keeps turning up in your pocket no matter how often you empty it. Wolf's mouth tightened faintly. "And you heard the call originate from inside that closet?" Lopez nodded hard. "Yes, made from there after hours." Wolf looked at me. "Archie." "Yes. You will go to the building now," Wolf said. "You will locate this phone. You will examine it. You will not do so alone," I said. "Durkin." Wolf nodded, yes, and Saul. Lopez started to rise. "I go too." Wolf regarded him with cool disapproval. "Number, you will remain here until you are safe, and until the inspector has taken your statement." Lopez's face tightened. "They find me." Wolf's voice was flat. "They will not find you in my house?" That was Wolf being generous, which is always a little startling. I called Saul and Durkin. Saul arrived first, calm as always, looking like a man who had merely stopped by to borrow a book. Durkin arrived a minute later, face blank, hands in his coat pockets, the kind of man who can make a stairwell conversation end quickly. We took a taxi uptown. The city was gray, traffic loud, people rushing. None of them aware that somewhere in a utility closet a phone had been used like a weapon. At the tower, the lobby was clean and polished and pretending yesterday had never happened. Caleb Rintz was not at the desk, which meant he was either hiding, working, or being handled. Elliot Prine was not on duty. A different guard watched us with that blank security stare that is supposed to be authoritative and usually just looks bored. I smiled, showed a badge I do not actually have, and said, "Maintenance." The guard hesitated, then buzzed us through. Authority is a costume, and in this building it was clearly a popular one. We took the service elevator. The air inside smelled like metal and cleaning fluid. Saul stood beside me, quiet. Durkin watched the corners, quieter, on the service floor. The hall was narrow and painted a color that tries to be cheerful and fails. The utility closet door was there, scuffed, with a worn keypad lock beside it. Durkin examined the lock. "Open it." "I don't have the code," I said. Saul said, "Lopez would." Durkin stared at me. I said, "He's back at the brownstone." Durkin's face did not change. "Then you get it open." I do not enjoy picking fights with locks, but the lock looked like it had been installed to keep honest. People honest, not to keep anyone determined out. Durkin produced a small toolkit like a magician, produces a rabbit. He used it with the calm competence of a man who has opened many doors that did not want to open. The latch clicked, the door swung inward. The closet smelled of mops, bleach, and trapped humidity. Shelves held supplies. A maintenance cart stood in the corner. Pipes ran along the wall. Nothing dramatic. Then Saul pointed a phone. It was mounted low on the wall behind a shelf, not hidden by camouflage, just hidden by inconvenience. A plain service phone with a keypad and a coiled cord. The kind you would use if you wanted privacy from the lobby desk and did not want a call to be seen by office receptionists. I stepped closer and looked at it. The keypad was too clean. Not clean like a new phone, clean like something that had been wiped hard with a cloth. There were faint streaks, the kind you get when someone scrubs fast and leaves behind the shine of panic. Durkin bent, sniffed once, and said, "Solvent," Saul said. "Bleach." I touched nothing. I only looked, because you can learn a lot without leaving your own prints. Saul crouched and traced the cord with his eyes. Where does the line go? The cord ran into the wall through a small conduit. That conduit led to a gray box mounted higher, partly hidden behind another shelf, a private switching box. Not the building's main system, not standard, something extra. Saul's voice was calm. Private PBX. Durkin looked at it. Who installs this? Someone who wants control, I said. Saul nodded. And someone who wants to route calls without.
Using the normal building logger. We took the shelf aside carefully. The grey box had a small panel with screws and a label that looked deliberately bland. There was a sticker on it, half peeled. I leaned in and read it. A vendor name, a serial number, an installation date, and a service contact. I felt my throat tighten. Greystone. Saul's eyes narrowed. Greystone Municipal. Durkin's expression did not change, but his posture shifted slightly, the way it does when a man finds a gun where he expected a pen. The contractor, the city work, the security vendors, the union tie. It was all moving from rumor and names into a physical object on a wall, I said, so the call was not distant. Saul replied, it was local, close enough to edit. We photographed the setup with a small camera Durkin produced. We did not touch the box. We did not open it. We left it exactly as we found it, because the best evidence is the evidence the other side believes is still invisible. On the way back down, in the service elevator, Saul said, if Greystone installed it, Greystone has access. Or they sold access, I said, Durkin said, or someone inside Greystone uses it without the company knowing. Saul looked at me. Do you believe that? I sighed. Number back at the brownstone. Wolf was in his office, calm, a beer at hand, as if evidence arrives for him the way mail arrives for everyone else. I told him about Lopez, about the closet, about the wiped keypad, about the private PBX box, and about the Greystone label. Wolf's eyes narrowed as if the name itself was offensive. The trail's shape, Wolf said softly, is now clear. I waited. The killer did not want distance, Wolf continued. Distance creates uncertainty. They wanted control, close enough to edit the world, close enough to erase a log entry and create a camera blind spot and route a call as internal, close enough to make obedience feel unavoidable, I said. So the voice was inside. Wolf nodded. Yes, or the voice was made to appear inside. The effect is the same. Authority is not a badge. It is a channel. Kramer arrived then, summoned by Wolf's phone call and drawn by the smell of something he could actually arrest. He walked in with his hat in his hand and his impatience on his face. What? Kramer growled. Wolf looked at him. Inspector, we have located the origin point of the internal call. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Origin point, Wolf said. A service phone in a utility closet, connected through a private PBX box, installed by Greystone Municipal or a subsidiary. Kramer's mouth tightened. Greystone. Wolf nodded. Yes. Kramer's jaw flexed. That's enough for a warrant. Wolf's voice stayed calm. It is enough to begin, not enough to end. Kramer glared. Wolf, you never think it's enough. Wolf regarded him with mild contempt. Because you consistently prefer handcuffs to understanding, Kramer snorted. Understanding doesn't hold up in court. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Evidence does. We have evidence now, we require the person, I said. Systems don't lie, people do. Wolf looked at me. Yes. He leaned back. Someone answers for this phone. Someone answers for this PBX. Someone decided that the call must look internal. Someone decided the keypad must be wiped. Systems do not decide, people do, Kramer said. You think it's Dask? Wolf's mouth tightened. Dask is a conduit. He uses codes. He collects envelopes. He enjoys borrowed authority. But the PBX is a different level. It suggests a person with access to building infrastructure and contractor infrastructure. Rinse, I said. Wolf nodded slightly. Possibly, or a supervisor above him, or a Greystone technician, or a union enforcer who can make a technician cooperate. Kramer's face darkened. Velin. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Yes. The room fell quiet for a moment, filled only by the faint hum of New York outside the window, and the knowledge that we were now touching something heavier than a dead courier. Lopez from the hall made a small sound. I glanced out and saw him standing there, pale, listening. Wolf's voice carried. Mr. Lopez, you have done your part. Inspector Kramer will arrange protection. Lopez whispered. They will come again, Wolf replied, calm and certain. They will fail, Kramer muttered. That's a promise you better let me keep. Wolf's eyes held his. Keep it. After Kramer left to begin the paperwork he loves to complain about, Wolf sat for a long moment without speaking. When he is quiet like that, it means his mind is arranging the next move, the way Fritz arranges a plate. With intention, finally Wolf said, Archie. Yes, the voice has been instructing everyone to listen, Wolf said. It believes obedience is natural. I nodded. And we just found its microphone. Wolf's mouth tightened. We found one. Now we will invite the wearer of the costume to speak in my office. I raised an eyebrow. How do you invite a man who hides in a utility closet? Wolf looked at me, and there was a faint glint in his eyes that I did not like. It meant he was about to do something that would make someone else do something foolish. We will announce, Wolf said, that we have traced the internal call and identified the PBX box. We will imply that we have recovered the missing notes or a duplicate. We will make the wearer of authority believe his control is slipping, I said. And when men who love control feel it slipping, they grab. Wolf nodded once. Yes. I glanced toward the window, thinking of that closet and that wiped keypad, and the kind of person who would rather make a call from inside the building than risk the uncertainty of distance. A person who wanted to be close enough to edit the world. My phone rang. Unknown number again, I answered, keeping my voice light. The low, calm voice said, You found the closet. I felt my neck tighten. I said, You should clean your keypad better. A pause, then the voice said, softly, Listen. I smiled without humor. The line went dead. I looked at Wolf. Wolf was watching me, eyes narrowed, expression calm. The costume is frightened, Wolf said. And close, I replied. Wolf nodded once. Yes, therefore it will act. That was not comforting. It was a promise. Chapter 9, Wolf's office has seen many gatherings, most of them unwilling. The brownstone makes an excellent trap because it looks civilized. People enter expecting polite talk and leave having learned the difference between politeness and mercy. That evening, Fritz served dinner with the steady dignity of a man refusing to let crime damage standards. Wolf ate, spent his customary time with the orchids, and then returned to the office, as if to a stage he owned. He had instructed me to have the chairs placed. I had placed them. He had instructed me to invite the actors. I had invited them. They came. Elliot Prine arrived first, hat in hand, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. He sat as if the red leather might accuse him. Gabe Ruggiero came next, jaw tight, trying to look defiant and failing. He sat, glanced at Prine, and looked away, as if fearing guilt might be contagious. Miles Harris arrived with the cautious composure of a man who handles other people's panic for a living. Breen, predictably, had declined to appear. He had sent Harris instead, like an expensive signature on a cheap check. He wore his suit-like armor and sat in it like a man waiting for instructions. The last one was the one Wolf wanted. He did not look like a villain. He looked like a man paid to stand near villains and keep their hands clean. He was broad, shouldered, neatly dressed, face ordinary enough to be forgettable on purpose. His eyes were calm, his mouth neutral, his posture relaxed in the way only dangerous men can manage. He introduced himself as if the name were disposable. "Len Hask," he said. "I'm here on behalf of Greystone." Wolf studied him with mild disdain, as if Hask were a fly that had landed on something expensive. "Mr. Hask," Wolf said, "you are not here on behalf of Greystone. You are here on behalf of concealment." Hask's mouth twitched slightly. "I don't know what you mean." Wolf lifted a hand, not for silence but for control. Control in Wolf's house is assumed. "Sit," Wolf said. Hask sat. Inspector Kramer was not present. Wolf had decided this was not yet a police performance. It was a truth performance, and Wolf likes to deliver those himself. Saul Panzer and Fred Durkin were in the house available. I was at my desk with my notebook open, pen ready, and my job clear. I was the legs, the eyes, and if necessary, the door. Wolf looked at the four men seated before him and began without preamble. "A man is dead," Wolf said. "Victor Lamb. He carried keys. He died because those keys permitted access to a tenant's safe, and because he was made to appear incidental, he was not incidental." Prine swallowed. Gabe's jaw clenched. Harris stared at Wolf, face controlled, but his hands were tight on his knees. Hask's expression remained neutral. Wolf's tone stayed calm, and that calm was more threatening than any shout. "We will proceed," Wolf said, "by laying out the chain." He looked at Gabe Ruggiero. "First," Wolf said, "the courier's route was altered. A last, minute stop added in pencil, not ink, after the route was approved. That alteration was made because Mr. Ruggiero received a call that sounded official and promised overtime compensation." Gabe's face reddened. "I told you I didn't kill nobody." Wolf ignored the protest. "You complied, you scribbled, you created deniability." He shifted his gaze to Elliot Prine. "Second," Wolf said, "the courier was lured into the building. Mr. Prine received a call on an internal line. No number. The caller knew his nickname and used it to establish familiarity. He instructed Mr. Prine to step away from the desk at the moment. The courier arrived." Prine's throat bobbed. "I thought it was a supervisor." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "You thought it was authority." He glanced at Miles Harris. "Third," Wolf said, "the camera in the lobby glitched for 6 minutes. Not an outage, not an accident. A loop was created, and the courier entered without a visible record. During that same interval, a safe on the 26th floor was opened without force, and papers were removed. Mr. Harris, you attempted to retrieve a replacement file because you believed those papers could topple a powerful contractor and a union connection." Harris's mouth tightened. "I was protecting my employer." Wolf's gaze stayed steady. "You were protecting your own position, Mr. Harris. That is more common." Harris said nothing. Wolf looked at Hask. "Fourth," Wolf said. The courier was silenced. Prine flinched. Gabe stared at the floor. Harris's eyes widened slightly. Hask's expression remained controlled, but I saw the tiniest tightening at the corners of his mouth. Wolf continued. "The killing was quiet. A blow, then pressure. No mess, no robbery. The key ring was taken. The papers were taken. The missing record was preserved by the absence of records. The call, the camera, the logbook, and the phone entries were all made deniable." Wolf leaned back slightly. "Now the question is simple. Who had the ability to command all these separate systems and the motive to protect the contents of those missing notes?" Silence settled. Wolf said, "We have found the origin point of the internal call. A hidden service phone in a utility closet, routed through a private PBX box. The box was installed under the name of Greystone Municipal. Therefore, you should be pleased to assist in identifying the individual who misused your equipment, Hask said. We have no equipment in that building. Wolf's eyes narrowed. That is false. Hask shrugged slightly. Then it's a subcontractor. Wolf nodded. A convenient answer. Now we come to the final element, the word that ties the calls together. Wolf reached into his desk drawer, produced a sheet of paper, and placed it on his blotter. Blue Lantern, Wolf said, and his eyes flicked, just once, to mine. He was pronouncing it long on purpose, the way you misname a man to see who bristles. Prine's eyes widened. Gabe blinked, confused. Harris went slightly pale. Hask's expression remained composed. Wolf continued. This phrase was used as a signal, a code. It was spoken on an internal call to the lobby security desk, and it was spoken again when Mr. Harris was instructed to retrieve a replacement file. Hask said nothing. Wolf's eyes narrowed. It is an old radio code used by dispatch personnel and certain contractors. Professionals shorten it by habit. Civilians don't correct it at all. Hask leaned back. A fraction. His mouth opened, and then a single word emerged, corrected with the speed of reflex. A one-syllable adjustment that landed like a dropped coin. It's lantern, Hask said, not blue. The room went still. It was not a dramatic stillness. It was the kind of stillness that arrives when everyone recognizes the sound of a mistake, a tiny mistake, a human mistake. The kind that cannot be erased with a wiped keypad. Wolf did not smile. His eyes merely sharpened. Hask's face changed slightly as he realized what he had done. His mouth tightened, his posture stiffened. Wolf's voice was quiet. Thank you, Mr. Hask, Hask said. I was correcting you. That doesn't mean I know anything. Wolf's gaze held him. You corrected by habit. Habit is knowledge. Knowledge that arrives too fast is confession-wearing speed. That was my cue. I stood and moved to the door, placing myself between it and the room with the ease of practice. I did not lock it. I did not need to. In Wolf's office, a closed door is more psychological than physical. Hask's eyes flicked toward me. Sit, I said pleasantly. Hask's jaw tightened. This is illegal. Not yet, I told him, but it can become unpleasant. Wolf regarded Hask as if he were now a specimen pinned to a board. You have just revealed, Wolf said, that you know the code intimately. You are not merely a messenger. You are a fixer. You handle instructions. You deliver pressure. You ensure obedience. Hask's voice hardened. You have no proof. Wolf's voice stayed calm. We have structure. We have equipment. We have call behavior. We have a murdered courier. We have your reflex correction. Now we will supply proof. He looked at me. Archie. Bring the telephone company maintenance printout. I retrieved it and handed it to Wolf. Wolf held it up slightly. There was no outage, no repair ticket, no reason for missing entries. The call was made to look internal. The camera loop was created to hide movement. The PBX box created a private channel. All of this required access, and access requires a key. Wolf's gaze sharpened. Victor Lamb carried a second key, separate from his ring, reserved for high-security clients. Mr. Ruggiero mentioned it. Mr. Dask mentioned it. You did not mention it, Mr. Hask, because you did not need to. You had already planned to take it. Hask's mouth tightened. I don't know anything about a second key, Wolf said. You will. Hask's eyes narrowed. You think you can trap me with a word? Wolf's tone stayed mild. Number. I trapped you with your need to correct me. He leaned forward slightly, voice quiet, precise. You are the one who placed the call from inside the building. You are the one who used the code. You are the one who ensured the guard stepped away and the camera loop ran. You are the one who obtained the papers. You are the one who silenced the courier. Hask's face remained controlled, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer calm. They were calculating, searching for a route out that did not involve walking past me. Wolf leaned back. Now we will see how loyal you are, Greystone will not protect you. Neither will Mr. Vellin. They will abandon you to preserve themselves, because that is what shared secrets do. A shared secret is a shared noose. Hask's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're messing with. Wolf's eyes were cold. I know precisely. From the hall came the sound of heavy footsteps. Saul Panzer opened the office door slightly and said, quietly, Inspector Kramer is here. Wolf nodded once. Excellent. I did not move from the door. Hask watched me, then watched Wolf, and then, for the first time, the fixer's neutral mask cracked enough to show anger. Kramer entered like a storm in a coat. His eyes took in the faces and the tension. What? He demanded. Wolf gestured toward Hask. Inspector, Mr. Hask has just confessed to knowledge that he should not possess. Kramer's brow furrowed. Confessed how? Wolf's voice was calm. By correcting the radio code. You want to explain that? Hask's mouth tightened. I corrected a word. That's not a crime. Kramer's eyes were hard. It is when it ties you to a murder. Hask's gaze flicked toward the door again. I smiled. Don't, I said. Wolf leaned back and said, Inspector, we will proceed to the final step. We will obtain the missing papers, the stolen keys, and the identity of the person who ordered the chain. Kramer growled. You already got the chain. Wolf's eyes narrowed. A chain is not an ending, it is a leash. Now we pull. Hask's eyes darted once more toward the door, toward me, and then back to Wolf. He had the look of a man realizing that speed had betrayed him. In Wolf's office, that realization usually comes right before the truth does. Chapter 10, the office gathering had the right smell. Not cigar smoke, because Wolf forbids it, and not sweat, because everyone was trying too hard to appear composed. It was the smell of consequence. You cannot bottle it, but you can recognize it. It arrives when a man has decided the room is no longer safe for pretending. Len Hask had been wearing neutrality like a well-cut suit. After his one-word correction, the suit had begun to pinch. Inspector Kramer stood near my desk with his hat in his hand, eyes narrowed, jaw set. Kramer likes a confession the way a starving man likes bread. He does not care if the bread is stale as long as it is solid. Wolf sat behind his desk, large, calm, and utterly unmoved by anyone's discomfort. He had his beer, his blotter, his patience, and the quiet certainty that the only way out of that room was through truth. Kramer said to Hask, You want to explain why you know that code? Hask's mouth tightened. I don't have to explain anything. Kramer's eyes hardened. You don't have to, but you will if you enjoy sleeping in your own bed. Hask looked at Kramer, then at Wolf, then at me. His eyes flicked toward the door again, as if measuring my width. I smiled pleasantly. You can try, but it will spoil the furniture. Wolf's voice was calm. Inspector, Mr. Hask has a choice. He can speak now, while he still believes he has leverage, or he can speak later, when Greystone and Mr. Vellin have decided he is expendable. Hask's nostrils flared. You keep saying names like you can prove them. Wolf regarded him with mild contempt. I say names because I know how power behaves. It abandons its tools. Miles Harris shifted in his chair, face pale. Elliot Prine looked as if he might faint. Gabe Ruggiero stared at the carpet like it was a friendly place to hide. The only man who still looked as if he might be comfortable was Wolf, and that was because Wolf is always comfortable in his own logic. Wolf leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hask, you corrected the code by habit. That habit comes from use. Use comes from access. Access comes from proximity. You were close enough to make the call appear internal. Hask's jaw tightened. You're guessing. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Number, I am describing the only shape that fits all the facts, the unlogged call. The 6-minute camera loop. The altered route. The open safe. The erased phone entries. The hidden service line and private PBX. These are not separate accidents. They are coordinated edits. Kramer barked. Eno, Hask, did you make the call? Hask stared at the floor for a beat, then lifted his eyes to Wolf, not to Kramer. That told me something. Hask did not respect the badge. He feared the mind. Yes, Hask said. The word landed with weight. Prine let out a small sound, like relief and terror mixed. Gabe's eyes closed briefly. Harris went pale. Kramer leaned forward. Say it again. Hask's mouth tightened. Yes, I made the call. Wolf nodded once, satisfied but not pleased. Proceed. Hask's eyes flicked to me again, as if reminding himself I was still blocking the door. Then he spoke, voice low and controlled, the way a man speaks when he has decided the least damaging truth is better than the most dangerous lie. I used the service line, Hask said, the phone in the utility closet. Kramer's eyes narrowed. How the hell did you get access to that? Hask shrugged slightly. Contractors get access. We install things. We maintain things. We have keys. Wolf's voice was quiet. Greystone installed the private PBX to route internal calls without using the building's standard log. Hask hesitated, then nodded. It made it clean. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Clean is an illusion, continue. Hask swallowed. The code made it sound official. People hear it. They don't question. They think it's dispatch or emergency protocol. They obey. Kramer snapped. What code? Hask's mouth tightened. Lantern. Wolf's gaze stayed steady. And you paired it with a command. Hask's jaw flexed. Listen. The room went still for a moment, as if that word had become a hook in the air. Wolf said, You called the guard. Hask nodded. I called the lobby desk. Internal line. No number. Told him the courier was coming. Told him to step away. He did. Prine's face flushed with shame. I thought it was real. Wolf's eyes flicked to him. Authority is real when you surrender to it. Kramer growled. And the camera glitch. Hask's mouth tightened, looped. We had access to the security vendor's interface. Not hard if you know the equipment. 6 minutes is enough for a man to enter and for someone to move without being seen. Wolf's voice stayed calm. And the route. Hask glanced at Gabe Ruggiero. He took money. It was easy. Gabe blurted, I didn't know about the killing. Wolf regarded him. No one ever does, Mr. Ruggiero. That is why you are useful. Kramer barked. Shut up and listen, Gabe, for once. Hask continued, voice tightening now as the story approached the part he disliked. The courier had the keys. The safe was opened. The notes were taken. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Who took them? Hask glanced toward Harris. He did, or his boss did. The office people. I handed them off. Harris stiffened. I did not touch any safe. Wolf's voice was dry. Mr. Harris, you are an executive aide. Your profession is touching things you pretend not to touch. Harris's face reddened. The papers were moved, that's all. Kramer snapped. Move where? Harris's jaw tightened. He looked at Wolf, then at Kramer, then back to Wolf, and finally said, A storage unit. Greystone arranged it. I was told to retrieve or destroy any copies. Wolf nodded once, because the papers could topple Mr. Velin and Greystone. Hask's mouth tightened. Yes. Kramer's eyes narrowed. And the courier, Victor Lamb, why is he dead? Hask's hands clenched once, then relaxed, because he recognized me. The room drew a collective breath. Recognition was the missing hinge. Wolf's voice was soft. You had met him. Hask nodded, reluctantly. He'd done key runs for Greystone sites. He knew faces. He was careful. He saw me in the stairwell after the safe job, and he knew it wasn't supposed to be me. Kramer's voice was rough. He resisted. Hask's jaw flexed. He said he'd go to the cops. He said he'd already left a message. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. The voicemail, listen. Hask's eyes flicked to Wolf. He tried to protect himself. He was not stupid. Wolf's tone stayed calm. Therefore you eliminated him. Hask swallowed. He fought. Not much, but enough. He grabbed my sleeve. He reached for his phone. I hit him, Then I finished it. Quiet, because noise brings uniforms. Kramer's face hardened. With what? Husk's voice was low. A tool. Something heavy. He went down. Wolf said. Then you staged it. Husk nodded, eyes flat now. We planned a stairwell accident. That was the story. The truth is uglier and quieter. After he went down, I took his breath away. Then we moved him, dumped him in the alley to keep the building clean. Wolf's eyes were cold. Yes, that is why you chose it. Kramer's jaw clenched, and you took the keys. Husk nodded. The ring, the second key, everything. We needed to make sure nothing led back. Wolf's voice stayed mild. You erased records. Husk's mouth tightened. We tried. Wolf leaned back slightly. You failed. Kramer turned his glare on the room as if he wanted to arrest the furniture too. All right, who ordered it? Husk hesitated. Wolf's voice was calm. Mr. Husk, you may attempt loyalty, but loyalty is expensive, and you are not a man who pays out of pocket. Husk's eyes narrowed. Then he exhaled. Greystone wanted the notes gone. The Union wanted them gone. Velin wanted them gone. Kramer's face darkened. Velin, Husk nodded once. He didn't make calls. He didn't touch anything. He told Greystone. Fix it. Greystone told me. Fix it, Wolf said. And you fixed it. Husk's mouth twisted. I fixed what they told me. Kramer growled. And the rest of these clowns. Wolf's gaze moved, precise, from face to face. Mr. Ruggiero took pay to add the stop, Wolf said. Mr. Prine obeyed a disguised authority and stepped away. Mr. Harris retrieved and moved the papers. Mr. Husk executed the operation and silenced the courier. He paused a beat. And Mr. Breen, Wolf added, benefited from silence but did not originate the act. He will now benefit from speaking to the authorities before the authorities speak to him. Harris swallowed. This will destroy everything. Wolf regarded him. No, Mr. Harris, it will merely reveal what was already rotten. Kramer straightened. His voice was tight and satisfied in the way only a man with handcuffs can be satisfied. Husk, you're coming with me, Harris. You too, Gabe. Prine, don't go anywhere. You'll be doing more talking. I stepped away from the door to let Kramer's detectives in. They arrived quickly, because Kramer had finally been given something he could hold. As the handcuffs clicked on Husk's wrists, I watched his face. He looked less angry now, more resigned. The costume had been stripped, and under it was the ordinary thing all costumes hide, a man who thought he could control the world by making other men obey. Kramer said, "You're done." Husk's mouth tightened. He said nothing. Wolf spoke then calmly, as if offering a final observation for the record. "A missing log is still a record," Wolf said. "It is written in consequences. It is written in what people did to erase it. It is written in a dead courier, an opened safe, and the frantic hands that wiped a keypad." Kramer snorted, but there was less irritation in it now. Yeah, save it for your memoirs." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "You will write the call down now, Inspector." Not in a switchboard book, in handcuffs. Kramer did not argue. He merely nodded to his men and started ushering his prisoners out, when the door closed and the house was quiet again. Fritz entered with fresh beer as if restoring order through hospitality. Wolf accepted the glass, sipped, and set it down. I sat at my desk, suddenly aware of how tired my bones were. "Well," I said, "the city finally logged the call." Wolf's mouth tightened faintly. The city rarely learns, it merely documents. I looked at the empty chairs where Fear had sat an hour ago. "No log," I said. "No proof." Wolf's eyes remained steady. Yet a man ended up dead as if someone had written instructions in advance. He lifted his beer slightly. Not in celebration, but in acknowledgement of an ending done correctly. "Archie," Wolf said. "The absence was the clue. The presence was the crime. That is the entire matter." Outside, New York's noise continued, indifferent. Inside, the brownstone returned to its civilized hush. The orchids upstairs waited for Wolf's attention, as they always did, blooming on schedule and requiring no one to say yes, sir. That, I thought, was the closest thing to mercy the city ever offers.